Hey, I'm Matt with Stronger You, and I show you how to add up to 200 pounds to your total in 4 months with less than 5 hours a week in the gym so you can have a life and compete in powerlifting. So today I want to answer the question of how strong do you need to be to compete in your first meet and actually be competitive, or at the very least, not make a total fool out of yourself by coming in dead last. Now, before we get started, if you want to skip 10-15 minutes of me yapping about powerlifting and instead just want to see the numbers for yourself and see how strong do I need to be, what's the number, what's my weight class, and then you have it, as well as a free guide on how to find your first meet in 60 seconds that you can go sign up and do. You can just click the link down in the description and it'll show you exactly everything you need to know. And it's my first meet guide, which is your strength standards and how to compete. It's a free ebook, no strings attached. You can get it for free again down the link in the description. And if you're not already, absolutely subscribe to my Instagram where I post a lot more of this content. So this question is something that I feel like comes up so incredibly often when somebody thinks about doing their first meet, and then they go on Instagram and you take a look and you see lifters like Austin Perkins doing 600 plus pounds, like a quadruple body weight squat as a warm-up, or female lifters like Jessica Bietner and some of her incredible performances that she has on the world stage. And it's really easy to fall into this trap of thinking that the sport of powerlifting is this incredible sport where there are just mutants doing absolutely insane weights the whole time. And the truth is that that's one aspect of the sport, just the same as you can go play touch football in a competitive local league, or you can be in the NFL. And where I feel like the disparity is with powerlifting is because it's so accessible. You can literally go buy a barbell and a rack, kind of like I've done here, and start lifting at home and teach yourself on YouTube how to lift. Because the barrier to entry is so low, it's very easy to think that that's what everyone else did too, and therefore everyone's competing on the same stage. And the reality is there's a lot of different levels to powerlifting meets. In fact, you've got open powerlifting meets, which is where anybody can sign up, all the way up to qualified meets like the Sheffield or Worlds, where you have to follow a very specific roadmap to reach that top end of being as competitive as possible. And so what I did is I analyzed the competitive performances of over 2,000 lifters last year in 2024 that competed in open powerlifting meets, which if you're going to compete at your first meet, that's what your first meet will be. And I took a look to see how strong are the lifters, how strong do you need to be to actually get onto the platform? And then on average, how strong do you need to be to win or to get on the platform? And really the results, I think, will shock you in that, first of all, there is a humongous amount of variance, weight class to weight class, and even competition to competition. Some states are a lot more competitive on average, others have a little bit of a smaller scene. And it might surprise you just how different those numbers are from what you might see on Instagram with 150-pound guys squatting 700 pounds and women benching 300 plus pounds and all kinds of crazy stuff that looks incredible and really is an incredible feat of strength. And so I want to show you just how different the sport might be, as well as explain how you can find those first meets. And we'll also talk about some of the benefits of lifting outside of purely showing up just to win, because like I'll share with you with a couple personal anecdotes, there are some pretty life-changing things you can get just by signing up from a powerlifting meet that have very little to do with how much you put up for your squat, bench, and deadlift PRs. So, like I'd mentioned a moment ago, I analyzed the performances of over 2,000 lifters to save you the time so you don't have to go through hours of open powerlifting results. And with the goal here of simply finding how strong do you actually need to be to compete at your first meet and not make a fool out of yourself. Now, at a bare bones level, you don't actually have to be able to do anything more than lift an empty bar in the squat, bench, and deadlift, which is about 45 pounds, give or take. But most people that want to compete, you can't take the fight out of the dog, we'll say. If you're at a point where you want to progress your lifting and you're serious about seeing your numbers go up, odds are you probably want to do well and not come dead last. So let's figure out what those numbers look like. So the results I'll share here quickly in the video span, roughly speaking, the more popular weight classes that we see with sort of the highest number of competitors. And for men, this is ranging between a body weight of about 165 or 74.5 kilos up to about 198 or 200 pounds, about 90 kilos or so. And on average, men who were able to create a total of about 1,300 pounds had the highest odds on average of ending up on the podium. So that means if you're able to squat mid 400s, deadlift mid 500s, and bench about 3 plates as a 200-pound guy, your odds of being top 3 are actually quite high. Now, what's interesting about this is the lowest number that I found at a local meet that was able to get on the podium was a bit over a 500-pound total, so almost a third of what we're seeing on average. And that would be the equivalent to squatting and deadlifting a little under 200 pounds and benching a bit over a plate in those same weight classes. And why I think this is interesting isn't that I think you should think that's good or bad or really have any kind of a statement around it, but purely acknowledging the fact that while powerlifting has recently become quite popular within the microcosm of the sport itself relative to where it was 15 years ago, the reality is that default medals are actually still quite common. And as I was going through all those meet results, there was quite a lot of competitions that happened, even in states where it is more popular, where there were 3 or less competitors in any given weight and age class. And as a result, that means that everybody in the class would get a medal. Now, this isn't good or bad, but it just goes to show that there's some meets that will have that. Now, obviously, as you get into more qualified meets, that becomes a lot less common. I've coached at, I can count on probably one hand how many qualified meets, so provincial or state level meet and up into regionals and nationals, that you're getting default medals handed out. It's quite rare. But at the local level, it's relatively common still, and that's fine. It just goes to show there's a lot of room to grow where the sport will become more popular over time, and that'll happen less and less, but it's probably never going to go away. And so while on average you might need to be putting up 1,300 pounds as a total, you might also need to do less in order to get on the podium depending on who shows up, and you can find that out if you want to nerd out by looking on Open Powerlifting and filtering down by state and seeing, on average in these open meets, who's showing up. Now for women, this is actually a little bit of a different story in that I found the range of totals to be a little tighter for the competitive side of things in terms of the average to get on the podium, but there was a lot less women in the sport as a whole, and so that occurrence of default medals was higher. And so again, taking some of the more common weight classes for women, so ranging from about 135, which is about 62 kilos, up to about 150 pounds or so, which is about 68 kilos or so. The totals that we saw on average to get onto the podium was about 727 pounds, which is about a 330 kilo total between their squat, bench, and deadlift. And that equates to about mid 200s on a squat, so about 115 kilos, mid hundreds on a bench press, so about 70 kilos or so. Think about putting the reds on the bar. And low 300s, think like 3 plates on your deadlift. So 145 kilos or so, 3 plates, 315, that sort of range, roughly speaking, to get onto the podium in those average weight classes. Now, what's interesting here is we saw a lot less of a steep drop off as we got into the lowest to get onto the podium, where it was actually just over 350 pounds. It was about a 365 pound total, which is about 165 kilos in order to get on the podium as sort of the lowest number we saw, ending up with a medal as a 135 to 150 pound female. So if you were worried about being competitive, but you can't squat 800 pounds and you've heard these numbers and you're like, I'm actually stronger than I thought I might be able to go compete, and that was the main thing holding you back, time to go find your first meet. And for finding your first meet, there's really quite a range of ways that you can find them. There's sanctioned or official meets where you'll see official powerlifting federations post them up. You can typically find these on websites like Lift Vault. Or if you know what your local powerlifting federation is called, you can just go to their website and they'll have the meets. Typically, meet fees range from about $70 to $180, depending on the level of competition and federation you're in, and time commitments pretty much just half a day on a weekend. So if you're able to train consistently, you've got your time that you can get to go to the gym and train, and then you've got the meet day, and outside of that, there's not really too much else that you need for time commitment, as long as you're not picking some competition on the other side of the country. There's other ways that you can find a meet as well. You can go onto Facebook. Some local powerlifting gyms might actually hold unsanctioned meets where they're putting on a competition. Think about it more as an unofficial practice competition where you can't set records, but you can absolutely go and test your strength out. These can be really fun because they're a little bit less formal. And if you want a way to find meets locally within your area, I'd recommend, again, checking out that guide. Again, the link is down in the description. It takes 60 seconds following the steps in that guide to find your first powerlifting meet, or at least the meet that you could register for. And at the time of making this video, which is the middle of June 2025, there are 88 powerlifting meets in the US that you can do between the middle of June and the middle of July. Now, most lifters are gonna wanna give themselves about 3 to 4 months to prepare for their first competition. But just to illustrate, over the next month, there's almost 100 competitions that you could do in the States. So that's like almost 2 competitions per month per state that you could do. And that's a pretty average rhythm these days. There's a lot of options. That means for most states, you're a 3 to 4 hour drive away maximum. And if you're in a major city, odds are you're probably 30 to 40 minutes away from a competition and signing up and really testing your strength out. And then one last thing that I actually want to add, this is something that's been quite recently brought to my attention, is on the topic of unsanctioned meets, there are internet competitions too. So if you live in a more remote area, or maybe you just don't love big public events with hundreds of people, and sometimes local meets are more like 20 people, but nonetheless, you don't want to go lift in front of a big stage. There's unsanctioned internet competitions like the Garage Gym competition. If you've never seen this, it's a super cool way where you can sign up and register for free. There's prizes that you can win for lifting, and it's a cool way to just have a date to work towards, which is actually one of the benefits we'll talk about outside of purely testing your strength against others. But it gives you a date that you can work towards in order to test your numbers and compare and see how things go without having to officially sign up for a meet, spend the money, deal with the travel and all those things that can come along with it. Now, one of the reasons that I'd mentioned that you'd want to actually even consider competing is having a date in your calendar. It can be so easy to feel like you just get lost in the sauce here and you lift 3, 4, 5 days a week, and then you get busy, and then you can kind of fall out of love with lifting because it just feels like this routine thing and there's no spice, there's no fun. And especially as you progress as a lifter, those gains don't come every session or even every week. And it's very easy to just get bored and feel like there's almost no point sometimes. You can catch yourself slipping with the motivation. And so like I mentioned, having a date to work towards, like even the GGC, like Garage Gym competition, or an official powerlifting meet, can be so beneficial for just re-sparking that and giving you a little bit more of a midterm goal to work towards. And to be frank with you, it's one of my favorite things about competing is that focus you get instantly. It's like free focus from having a date and putting, okay, summer powerlifting competition, July 26th. That's the next meet I'll be at. But summer powerlifting competition, it's in the calendar. I'm 5 weeks out right now. And having that countdown in your head, just immediately you focus in a little more on the training. You find that you're more motivated to sleep and lock in your recovery and have the diet dialed in and push a little harder on that top set in training. And it can be super, super motivating that way. Now, on top of actually having that date and that countdown and sort of these more short-term goals as opposed to lifting until I'm dead, there's a couple other cool things that you can get out of lifting. There's actually 4 more reasons that I think you should sign up for a powerlifting meet. So reason number 2 is that it's really interesting to see a lot of lifters, especially if you're not the strongest one, put up certain weights. And if you've ever trained at a powerlifting gym before or talked with other lifters who are stronger than you, you'll probably notice that you can pick up on certain things, and things you thought were a big deal are actually maybe not. About 8, 9 years ago, I joined my first powerlifting gym coming from a commercial style gym. And my bench had been stuck for a few months at 275 at that point. And in 3 months, without changing my training program, without changing my nutrition, without gaining any body weight, I had my first ever bench over 300 pounds. I added 30 pounds to my bench in 3 months, purely from an environment change. And I was just more motivated. I got more out of my head and more into my body with the lifting. I stopped thinking that 275 was a big deal because at a commercial gym, it was. And at a powerlifting gym, it was pretty normal to see people warming up with 275. And so for me, getting out of that big fish in a small pond kind of vibe and seeing the potential that I could grow to was incredibly motivating, and actually one of the big places that I grew as a lifter in removing a bit of that glass ceiling to my strength. Now, on top of that, reason number 3 is it's really a great test of your strength. If you don't normally train with spotters, but you want to see where your maxes are at, powerlifting meets are great. They have multiple spotters, making sure that if you miss a lift, they're just going to grab the bar, take it away from you, and then you're safe that way. So it keeps things a little bit smoother. Reason number 4 is the community side of things. Now, like I'd mentioned with the powerlifting gym, you can connect with a lot of other lifters and see, hey, what all's going on? Who's doing what? As opposed to being in your own little bubble. And being able to meet those other lifters and talk and hear different approaches is really cool for self-programming and understanding and seeing where some of those next progressions might come by talking with those people who are one level past where you're at right now, kind of the next step on your lifting journey. And by talking with those people and learning where they're at and seeing what they're doing and the mistakes that they've made and how they fix them, you can actually quite often, if you're paying attention, skip some of the setbacks and speed bumps and plateaus that you would normally come through if you had to go through the whole thing by yourself and do trial by error. So connecting with other more knowledgeable lifters is a really cool benefit to competing in powerlifting. And then finally, my favorite one is number 5. And that's really the lifelong connections you make by joining a sport that people are so incredibly passionate about. So you might know this about me if you've been following my work for a while, but Chad is one of my best friends. I met him at my first powerlifting meet in BC in 2014. And I'd been competing for a while, but still fairly new to the sport. I've been competing for a couple of years. And at this point, he is one of my best friends, and he was actually the best man at my wedding. And had it not been for powerlifting, I would have never met the guy. We have nothing else in common. And from somebody who really wasn't good at sports as a kid, I actually frankly was a little jaded about sports before I found powerlifting. Being able to discover that community and make those personal connections with people who have a really shared interest in the pursuit of strength has been transformative. I have friends, multiple friends, that as somebody who's not very extroverted, not incredibly social, I've made connections through the sport of great friends that I've been connected with for over a decade now, just by signing up to go compete and see, how strong am I. So wrapping things up, odds are, if you've been training for a few years at this point, you're probably strong enough to go compete in your first meet. It's incredibly simple to find that first competition, whether it's an official meet, like a sanctioned meet, and you can find any of those in 60 seconds with my first meet guide, linked in the description below, or an unofficial meet, something internet-based like the garage gym competition. But being able to connect with other lifters and finding a lot of those benefits outside of competing is a tremendous side benefit that you can get as you work to develop yourself and grow and really find the strongest version of yourself through the barbell. And so at this point, I want to pass the conversation on to you. If you've competed before and maybe done a couple meets, I'd be curious to hear, what is one of your fondest memories from lifting? Like, what got you into lifting and what's kept you in the sport for this long? And if you haven't competed yet, but you've been thinking about doing your first powerlifting meet, why haven't you signed up just yet? Were you waiting for something? Was this video, exactly what you were waiting to see because you were in your head about how strong you might need to be? Let's talk about it in the comments. And as always, thank you very much. If you're not already, please subscribe to my YouTube and my Instagram at StrongerUPT, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.